Hi, I'm Jake.
I'm Hunter.
And somehow he managed to convince me to build a two-seater Formula One car with him, take him to school. The chassis is basically done. We're now building the Formula One seats. So we thought we'd do a bit of a walkthrough on the process that we've taken to build them. So enjoy. So unfortunately, I didn't actually video the first few steps that I took to get to this stage of the seats. So I'm going to take the next couple of minutes or so just to explain what it is that I did and how we got here. So the seats for this build are really important. The seated position of a Formula One car is very different to a normal car, as you can imagine. So the first step was to design the seats that were going to work within the build and make sure that it gave the actual seating position that I was looking for. What I did was I actually 3D modeled the seats based on a Formula One play seat, put it into CAD and then actually 3D printed the whole seat. So as you can see here, this is the seat that I came up with, and this is some software that actually cut it into pieces small enough to be able to fit in my home 3D printer. There was about 36 pieces in the end, I think, so there was a lot of plastic welding afterwards. Once all the pieces were plastic welded together, that gave me a full working model that I could pick up and actually put into the chassis to make sure it fit where I wanted it to fit, and the size was right, the distance was right, I had enough leg room for pedals, etc. But one thing I did notice when doing this was that it was actually a little bit wider than I had anticipated, which is fine because the 3D printed model was only ever going to be a template for the steel frame that you can see here. So once I'd got that steel frame modelled and built, so the frame itself is actually made from 6mm round bar in multiple different pieces, bent to match the curvature of the actual 3D printed seat that I used as the template. Once I was happy with the seats and I'd got two that were identical, I then added the frames at the bottom, which will connect to the rails in the chassis and keep it nice and strong. So the next step is what I'm doing here. I'm covering the entire seat in masking tape. And what this does is it bridges the gaps between the steel wire frame and actually provides a somewhat solid structure for the fiberglass to sit on top of. And once the fiberglass is cured, you'll never even know it's there. Now I didn't do this on the first seat, as in bridge this gap underneath, and it made fiberglass folding over really difficult, so doing it this way should hopefully save me a bit of pain. basic shape pretty much there. I'm just going to go back through now and make a few bits stronger. When the resin's being poured on, obviously gravity takes place, so when especially doing this part up here, essentially the resin kind of runs down a little bit and it kind of accumulates in the bottom, which is really good because then it makes the bottom really super thick and super strong, which is great because the idea is getting in and out of the car. That's essentially where you're going to put your feet to be able to slot yourself in, kind of like a go-kart, but need to make sure it's strong enough to hold it. I dropped it. Back to this. And there we have it, fully covered, fully ready to go. Next step is fiberglass.